Hello, my name is Phil, and I am with the Menard Center for Constitutional Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Constitution, but specifically, I want to focus on the First Amendment and talk a little bit about a couple cases that have gone through the Supreme Court that have really shaped how it is we currently interpret the First Amendment and the rights involved with it. Before I begin, I should tell you I'm not a professor at UW-Eau Claire. I'm just an administrator. So if you were promised some well-published professor or a lawyer who spent years and years in the basement of the Library of Congress doing research on constitutional matters, well, you may want to ask for your money back. I am not that person. I think it's important, though, that I am here today to talk to you as a more or less non-expert, because that is exactly what our center is trying to do. We think that everyone should become an expert on the U.S. Constitution. And our center is working to help provide opportunities for our college students mainly to better understand the rights and responsibilities that are spelled out in the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution belongs to every citizen. You don't need to become fully vested to gain the rights that are afforded you in the U.S. Constitution. They are granted to you the second you are born. You also never retire from these rights. You don't age out of being a U.S. citizen. This is why our center is so passionate about helping our students at UW-Eau Claire learn more about their constitutional rights. Another thing we try to focus on in our center is the importance of civil dialogue. We all like to be right. I hate to be wrong. But what happens when two people come into conflict or come together with different ideas about what is right and what is wrong? They can fight, they can argue, and sometimes they just refuse to talk. Don't imagine you've seen any of these things happen in our society today. They're everywhere. What we try to do with our center through bringing in speakers or having discussions with our students or running workshops is we want to help people to learn that there are different opinions out there and that we can rationally discuss these ideas and argue against them, and sometimes passionately. But that doesn't mean we don't have to listen to the other side. And hopefully by doing this, we can make our bad ideas a little less bad and our good ideas better. Our center focuses heavily on the First Amendment because without the First Amendment, none of the other rights would be or could be guaranteed. The text of the First Amendment reads as follows. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. That's it. All of our speech rights are secured in that one reasonably short paragraph. These 5 protections, speech, press, religion, assembly, the freedom to petition the government, are considered our core freedoms of the First Amendment. And they are vital to the functioning of a democratic society. The First Amendment ensures that citizens are able to express their views, seek and receive information, and engage in public discourse without the fear of government retaliation or suppression. Now, the Constitution refers to government acts of Congress, but this is widely believed, has been interpreted to mean any government or state actor. I want to talk about a couple cases today that the Supreme Court ruled on that give you some ideas. And these cases have probably occurred in your lifetime. And we're continuing to evolve our view of what the First Amendment says and how it is interpreted in the law. The first case I want to talk about is the case of Tinker v. Des Moines Independent Community School District. This case we'll just call Tinker, was a landmark Supreme Court case that occurred in 1969. And it involved a group of high school students, teenagers, who wore black armbands to school to protest the Vietnam War. The school district had a policy that prohibited students from wearing armbands to school, although other types of insignia or emblems were allowed, but just not armbands. And these students were suspended for violating this policy. The students and their families filed a lawsuit arguing the school policy violated their First Amendment right of free speech. The case ultimately went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the students, stating that students do not lose their constitutional rights when entering a school environment. The court held that the school district's policy violated the students' right of free speech because it was not justified by legitimate educational interest and did not cause a substantial disruption to the educational environment. The court stated that students have the right to express their opinion and ideas on school grounds, as long as it does not disrupt the educational process or infringe on the rights of others. The Tinker case established an important precedent for students' free speech rights, and it continues to be cited in cases involving student expression today. Tinker was a significant turning point in the legal history of free speech for public high school students. Prior to this case, it was widely believed that schools had broad discretion to limit student speech in the interest of maintaining order and discipline. Schools must have a compelling reason to limit student speech. The Tinker decision has been cited in numerous cases since then, in cases involving students' free speech rights online or even off campus. It remains an important precedent for understanding the extent of student free speech rights in the context of the school environment. One famous quote from the ruling in Tinker was this: "It can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate." This quote highlights the court's recognition that students have the same constitutional rights as adults, including the right to free speech, and that these rights must be protected even within the school environment. This statement has become a rallying cry for students and advocates seeking to protect free speech rights in school. Overall, the Tinker case stands as a testament to the power of student activism and the importance of protecting free speech rights in all contexts, including public schools. Seems like a pretty easy, straightforward one, right? Well, how about this one? How about the case of Snyder v. Phelps? This is another landmark First Amendment case heard by the United States Supreme Court in 2011. The case arose from a protest held by the Westboro Baptist Church, a controversial religious organization known for its extreme views on and inflammatory demonstrations. In 2006, members of the Westboro Baptist Church picketed the funeral of Matthew Schneider, a Marine who had been killed in Iraq. The protesters had signs with messages such as "Thank God for dead soldiers," and they used other inflammatory language to express their views on the war and against homosexuality. In this controversial decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Westboro Baptist Church. The court held that the First Amendment protections of free speech extended to even the most offensive and controversial speech, including the messages displayed at the funeral protest. The court emphasized that the public discourse on matters of public concern must be protected, even if the speech is hurtful or offensive to individuals. The court also noted that the protests were also held on public property and they didn't interfere with the funeral itself, further supporting their free speech First Amendment protections. The ruling of Schneider v. Phelps is widely criticized by many who saw the Westboro Baptist Church action as hateful and hurtful. However, the ruling underscored the importance of protecting even unpopular, controversial speech under the First Amendment and set an important precedent for future cases involving offensive or inflammatory speech. An important quote from the ruling was, we cannot react to that pain by punishing the speaker. As a nation, we have chosen a different course to protect even hurtful speech on public issues to ensure that we do not stifle public debate. This quote emphasizes the importance of protecting even hurtful and offensive speech in order to safeguard public debate and free expression. The court acknowledges emotional pain caused by the Westboro Baptist Church, but emphasized that punishing the speaker for their speech would undermine the First Amendment protections of free speech and expression. Why have I picked these particular two cases out of really the hundreds of cases that I could have talked about? Well, there are two reasons. The first is to make the point that speech that we probably agree with, like the case of Tinker wearing an armband to school, and speech that we find disgusting or abhorrent, are still protected by the First Amendment. And it's only by having those protections that we can ensure our speech will be protected under almost any circumstance. The second reason is because these two cases have a direct connection to our center at UW Eau Claire. A year and a half ago, we had Mary Beth Tinker for an event at our center. And Mary Beth was the little girl who wore the armband. And she is still a passionate advocate for student free speech rights and even helped encourage the surviving children of the Sandy Hook massacre to turn their protests into a national movement. Now, back in March, we had welcomed Megan Phelps Roper, former member of Westboro Baptist Church, to give a talk on our campus. She was the granddaughter of Fred Phelps. She was out on those picket lines, holding up those awful signs. But now she's an advocate for free speech, because it was only with having conversations with people who tried to compassionately challenge her ideas that she was able to realize the error of what she was preaching and leave her family and her church to start a new life. The Menard Center for Constitutional Studies wants all citizens to learn about their constitutional rights and take an active role in the future of the country. To borrow a phrase from the immortal words of Abraham Lincoln in the Gettysburg Address, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they have given their last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth, of freedom, and that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from earth. Thank you.